Now, I'd like to introduce our morning keynote speaker, Richard Sheridan. Richard is the author of Joy Inc. and Chief Joy Officer, and is also the CEO, Chief Storyteller, and co-founder of Menlo Innovations. When he started his own company, he and his partners decided that the company's purpose would be to bring joy to the world through software and to teach this method to others. Richard was featured on the cover of Forbes magazine in 2003, sharing his Hire Yourself story in the world. Menlo has gone on to win the Alfred P. Sloan Award for Business Excellence and Workplace Flexibility for 8 straight years, and has earned 5 revenue awards from Inc. magazine. And I think Richard would tell you it's his company that won that award, his people. Richard spends the majority of his time sharing the Menlo Way by teaching classes, leading tours, speaking at conferences, mentoring entrepreneurs in the community, and sharing joy. Please help me welcome Richard Sheridan.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. You've all come here in the pursuit of excellence. You want excellence. If you have it, you want to sustain it. Once you've sustained it, you want it to become part of who you are. I don't think it'll be any surprise to you that excellence requires the courage of leadership. And what does that courage and leadership look like? Well, Rollo May, the psychiatrist, once famously stated that the opposite of courage is not cowardice, but conformity. You're not going to get to excellence by doing things the way everybody else does them. I'm here to take you out to the edge of excellence and encourage you to consider that joy and love may be in front of you as you consider where you go next in your pursuit of excellence. Let me tell you a little bit about my life story. I started out as a programmer way back in 1971. Yes, kids, there were computers back in 1971. I know that's hard to imagine. They worked a little differently than they do today. I was only a kid. I was 13 years old. I was in high school. I typed a 2-line program into a computer, and it came back on a roll of paper and clacked out, "Hi, Rich," because that's what I told it to do. And literally at 13 years old, I decided what I wanted to do the rest of my days. My kids are still astounded by that. They're like, "Seriously, Dad, you decided at 13 years old what you're going to do the rest of your days?" Yes, I did. By 1973, I typed all of the Major League Baseball players into the computer so my friends and I could play baseball, our favorite baseball teams, against one another in the cold Michigan winter months. Yep, you're looking at the guy who invented fantasy baseball. My life is likely littered with lost opportunities like this. But that program won me an international programming contest and actually landed me my first job as a programmer. I couldn't believe people would pay me to do this thing I love to do as a hobby. I kept working through high school graduation, eventually went to the University of Michigan and got 2 degrees in computer science and computer engineering, and a career was launched. And if you remember 1982, it was a big inflection point for the computing industry. This was the year that an old argument had finally been laid to rest. There was a guy that you probably don't remember who ran a company you've probably forgotten by now, named Ken Olsen, who ran Digital Equipment Corporation. And he claimed that we would have at need for at most 4 computers on planet Earth. There was another young kid like me who believed there would be one on every desktop, and I think we know who won that argument. So there I was, 1982, primed, ready, passionate, excited. I'd had 11 years of programming experience in an industry that was about to take off, and I will tell you the career that followed looked perfect. I had everything the world measures as success. Job, title, authority, paycheck, stock options, title, responsibility, team size. And can you hear the yet coming? And yet there was something fundamentally missing. And by my mid-30s, on my way to VP of R&D, I wanted out. I wanted to get as far away from this industry as I could because my heart was breaking for an industry that I thought would carry me for a lifetime. So what was I missing? Well, in your parlance, I was missing excellence. In my parlance now, I know that I was missing the joy of a career that I thought I would be so excited about forever. So what was going on? How could I have all that worldly success on my way to being a VP at a high-flying public firm? Well, I will tell you, if you have experience with software, and I'm guessing most of you do, I usually get on a stage like this and want to apologize on behalf of my whole industry for what we've done to the rest of the world. Because we're all tortured by software, right? Everywhere we look. And the people inside are experiencing chaos. Chaos in the software industry is easy to imagine. Firefighting, missed deadlines, blown budgets, lousy quality delivered wherever we go. Often I would come home after the end of very long days, sometimes all-nighters, sometimes through the weekend. My wife would look at tired me and she'd say, "Honey, you look really tired. Did you get a lot done today?" And suddenly I realized, no, I got nothing done today. I was busy from one end of the day to the other. I was running from phone call to phone call, fires blazing out of control, absolutely nothing done. And in the land of chaos, you know it, bad things happen. You have negative events in your organization, no matter what kind of chaos you're experiencing. The one I write about in my first book, fortunately, wasn't my negative event, but it was significant. A tired programmer for Knight Capital Group made a simple server update error in the next 45 minutes. Their New York Stock Exchange trading platform traded $7 billion worth of securities it wasn't supposed to, costing Knight Capital Group $400 million in losses in 45 minutes. Would that be considered a negative event where you work? And you know the routine. Once a negative event happens, there's always a corporate response to negative events. In the software industry, it looks like a big 3-ring binder. We give it a name, we give it an acronym, we call it the software development lifecycle. And it's just a book of non-value add documents, stage gates, committees, approvals, standing meetings. And you go from chaos to full-blown bureaucracy. You have to put a police force in charge of it. And you go from the land of never getting anything done to, quite frankly, the land of never getting anything started. Because you're waiting for an approval to happen, you're waiting for a budget to be approved, you're waiting for a committee to meet. And in the software industry, I will tell you, stuff still has to go on, so shadow groups form. You placate the bureaucracy while operating in chaos simultaneously, right? And I can see you. You're like, who's he been talking to at our organization? Oh, it gets better. You're going to be squirming in a minute. Because you see, what happens is somebody wakes up one day and they said, hey, I think we went too far with the bureaucratic thing. Let's back off a little bit. Let's get a light version of our documents and procedures, just a little stapled together document for small projects, just a few sign-offs, a few committees, a few approvals. But even that doesn't work. So we cancel the SDLC, we fire the PMO, we declare we're lean now, we're agile. And all that usually means is we prefer chaos. Because chaos at least feels like there's energy in the room, not a bunch of people sitting around waiting. And this was my life, back and forth it went. And that's what was going on there. And I wanted out. I had an escape route planned. I was going to start a canoe camp in the boundary waters of Minnesota. Yeah, the women always laugh just like my wife does when I say that. I have 3 daughters. They'll literally ask me, "Dad, did you really think we would follow you to the boundary waters?" But those who know me well know I'm an optimist. My co-founder, James, calls me an infernal optimist. I think he means eternal optimist, but I was stuck in a room full of manure, and I was going to keep digging because I knew there was a pony in here somewhere. And I think that's why you're here. You're here searching for the pony. You know there's one there. You know there's a better way of doing things than is customary. But what I realized was my journey out was not a technological journey. I realized that the challenge I faced was a human challenge. How do we organize the human beings better? And so my journey out led me to authors and books. Books like Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence, Peter Drucker's books on management, Peter Senge's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of learning organizations, and his focus on systems thinking. Later, books like Patrick Lencioni's Five Dysfunctions of a Team. All of these books were telling me there was a better way of doing things and that some had achieved it, but nobody would tell me how to get there. And then in 1999, I read a book by a guy named Kent Beck on something called extreme programming. And this is not about programmers jumping off of cliffs with bungee cords or anything like that. It was a different way to organize a software team. And then I was introduced to the idea of design thinking through a video that Nightline put on about the industrial design firm in Palo Alto called IDEO. And there, boom, click moment. Suddenly I knew exactly where I was going. And over the next 2 years, I reinvented that tired old public company I was a VP of into something that looks just like Menlo does today. And in 2001, there was another big inflection point in the software industry. You might remember it. It was when the internet bubble burst. And suddenly, after this rapid career rise, I came home and told my wife I'd lost my job. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "You're unemployed now?" I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." Hang on to that one. You might need it someday. Remember, eternal optimist. It took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment. I lost everything in 2001. Job, title, authority, paycheck, stock options went to zero. Except for one thing. They could not take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And what I had learned was, this isn't about finding the perfect setting now for bureaucracy. You can actually throw this picture away entirely and replace it with something else. And that's what I want to talk with you about today, to inspire you to that edge of leading with joy. The metaphor I'm going to use is one that attaches to a hobby of mine, flying little airplanes. I'm going to give you a little introductory lesson to aerodynamics, so get ready. Number your notes from 1 to 1,000. There will be a test later. So there's 4 fundamental forces at work on an aircraft, and I believe they are similar to the forces at work on a human organization. There's the lift that holds the plane up based on the camber of the wing. There's the countervailing force of weight that holds it down. There is the force of thrust that pulls us forward, and the drag that holds us back. So how does this equate to a human organization? Well, one of the things that I think we need to mind in our human organizations is that lift of human energy. With all the talk about sustainability and fields of energy that we're trying to conserve and be better stewards of, I think the field of human energy is probably one of the most underrated ones we have. I mean, the statistics have been the same for how long? 60, 70% of people disengaged at work. We need to focus on the human energy of our team. The countervailing force that holds us down is that weight of bureaucracy. We'll need more human energy than the bureaucratic weight that's holding us back. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of purpose. And the drag that holds us back is the drag of fear. These forces at work on our human organizations. So how can we do that? How can we lift up human energy of our teams? Well, I can tell you, clarity helps a lot. Clarity over ambiguity. Is my friend Karen Martin in the room? awesome. She wrote a whole book on this subject. There is no question that there is a way to get people to feel good about work if they can go to work and get meaningful things actually done at work. I don't know about you, but I'm a checklist-oriented guy. My wife often has a dozen things for me to do on the weekend, and if I get 3 of them done and I forgot to write my list, I'll go write the 3 I did just so I can cross them off. Because it feels so good, right? We love that. The weight that holds us down is the weight of meeting load. I think in most large organizations, there's a layer of management from there and above. Those people are literally human sacrifices to meetings. You can tell because there's people inside of a meeting room and the people outside are going, we got to get in there. And they're like, yeah, just one more minute. And then the people coming out saying, see you later, I'm going to my next meeting. Look, if you want to drag out the human energy of your team, if you want to really weigh yourself down, have lots of meetings. And whatever you do in those meetings, do not make any decisions. And if by chance you make a decision by mistake, just don't act on it. And you will suck the life out of your organization. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of purpose, an externally focused purpose. I will talk about this more later, but I want you to contemplate as you are at this conference and as you go home 2 fundamental questions around purpose, because I believe these purposeful questions are an act of leadership. Who do you serve and what would delight look like for them? Easier to ask than answer, I can assure you. And the drag that holds us back, the drag of fear, there's so many different ways we pump fear into organizations. I don't know about you, but when I popped out of my managerial eggshell back in the 80s, I was a little managerial duckling, and I did the only thing a duckling does. You imprint on the person in front of you, and that was my boss. That's who promoted me. And he taught me to lead with fear. He would literally tell me, Rich, if you just walk around, go up to people and say, hey, how's it going? What you working on? Are you almost done? How's that project going? Are you coming in this weekend? Can you feel your blood pressure rising when I do this? I'm actually pretty good at this. I had years of practice. You know, my friend Tom Peters says management by walking around, but my boss crafted a different version of that. It was management by walking around and annoying people. He told me, Rich, if you see 2 people standing in a corridor talking to one another, just walk up to them and stand there. They'll get back to work. I'm serious. This is how I was taught. I'm really good at this. Now think about the tools that we use to generate fear within our organization. Let's pick a favorite of Deming's, the egregious annual performance review, right? Do you think there's ever been a human being in the history of business who ever went into their annual performance review, the process that ruins everyone's December, by the way, bosses and workers alike, but do you think anybody ever walked in their annual performance review thinking to themselves, yeah, this year I pretty much just met expectations. I didn't do anything special. No, everybody goes in going, this is the year. I tore the cover off the ball this year. This is my year for exceeds expectations. And then the boss pulls you in and says, well, you know, Rich, only 3.7% of you can exceed expectations this year. And you got an exceeds 5 years ago, so you're just going to have to wait your turn. And by the way, there was that thing you did in January, and you did it 3 times again in February and 5 times in March. And yeah, so get better. I know you guys are experts in systems thinking. I know that's what you think about like I do all day long. Let me tell you where systems break down. Long communication and feedback loops. Can there be a worse long communication feedback loop in managing our humans than the annual performance review? Now, if we want to get our organizational aircraft off the ground, we probably need to make some adjustments. It'd be neat if we got rid of all the fear and all the bureaucracy. Not practical and actually probably not healthy, but we can reduce it. We can do things to lift the human energy of our team and increase our purpose. And if we do that, wait for it, our organizational aircraft will get off the ground every single day. By the way, my team is very proud of the fact that they could make that airplane move like that. All right, you didn't know you were going to get a deep lesson in aerodynamics, but this is really important. In the design of an aircraft, if you look at it square on, you're going to notice the wings are tilted up just a little bit. That angle is called a dihedral. And that angle is really important in the design of an aircraft because what it produces is positive stability. If you didn't have that angle, what you would end up with is catastrophic instability. Why is this important to leadership? Because when little things happen, when our organization is bumping around like we feel in the aircraft when we hit that pocket of turbulence, if we've designed our systems with positive stability in mind, the systems themselves will correct the small problems so that the work of leadership can focus on the important issues. This is why systems thinking is so important. One last thing about the role of leadership. If we equate the pilot to the leader, no, when that runway's running, when that airplane is pulling down the runway and it hits takeoff speed, the pilot makes a very simple move on the yoke, pulls it back just a little bit. That tilts the elevator down and creates a new angle in the nose of the aircraft. That angle has a beautiful name. It's called a positive attitude. If we can inject just a little bit of a positive attitude in organizations, guess what? We will fly. Now, if we look back at the history of flight, when the Wright brothers finally got off the ground in 1903, there was a competitive team in Washington, D.C., led by Samuel Pierpont Langley. Langley's team was better funded. They had a bigger team. The Wright brothers were operating out of a bicycle shop in Dayton, Ohio. But as soon as the Wright brothers took off, Langley quit. There was so much more to discover. I don't know why he quit, but I have a theory, and the theory goes to purpose. Langley was trying to build an airplane. He wanted the glory of being first. The Wright brothers wanted to fly. Big difference. If you're really honest with yourselves, you want to fly. You want your organizations to fly. Now, shortly after that first powered flight, Orville Wright was interviewed, and he declared, "We will never be able to build an aircraft that can carry more than 2 people. It's just not physically possible. The weight of the engine, the weight of the fuel, the passengers, the aerodynamics just won't work." How do I know this? I read it in a book. I read it in a book on a 747 on a flight from Detroit to London. 400 passengers, 50,000 gallons of fuel, flying at 500 miles an hour at 35,000 feet in total creature comfort. The first 747 took off in 1969, a scant 20 years after Orville Wright passed away. Almost in the context of his lifetime, this happened. And I will declare to you that this is why you're here. Because what you're looking for are the relevant principles of human organizations that can lift the human energy of your team and cause your team to fly to heights and distances that were previously unimaginable. This is why you inconvenienced your life to come here. This is why you're going to go to sessions. This is why you're going to seek out colleagues, because you're trying to figure out what are the relevant principles inside of our human organizations. What should we be working on? Here's a little glimpse into my organizational aircraft. One big open room. doing software design and development on behalf of our clients. Everybody at Menlo works to a computer. The pairs are assigned. We switch them every 5 working days. The human energy alone that results from that simple construct causes people, when they walk into the room, to literally say, wow, because you can feel the energy of the room. Now, what was my equivalent thought in 2001 when we started Menlo? That equivalent thought to we could never build an aircraft that carry more than 2 people. Well, I will tell you, I wanted to escape firefighting. I wanted to escape emergencies. If somebody had suggested to me back then, so how many emergencies do you think you can get down to? I'd say, well, maybe 1 a day. And somebody said, well, what about better than that? Maybe 1 a week. I'm like, oh, come on, this is software. You got to be kidding. What about 1 a month? What about 1 a quarter or 1 a year? I'd say, are you crazy? No way. The last time this team remembers a software emergency, 2004. It's been 15 years. Now let me tell you, when I started saying that 6, 7, 8 years ago, I thought, oh, you're tempting fate. Stop saying it. We're 15 years in. We're not error-free, we're not bug-free, but we are emergency-free. The effect this has on the morale of our team, the confidence, the productivity, the energy that comes out of this is remarkable. We actually have to explain to younger members of our team what a software emergency is. It's crazy. So what do we need to do as leaders to build that culture of joyful leadership? If we're going to go beyond excellence and move into joy, and this isn't meant to be an exhaustive list, but it's what we've discovered along the way. Number 1, start with purpose. Answer those 2 questions I talked about. Who do you serve, and what would delight look like for them? Now, let me take the 3 standard stakeholders off the table: your customers, your employees, and your shareholders. Of course you have to serve them. If you don't serve your customers, you go out of business. If you don't serve your employees, you won't have anybody to do the work. If you don't serve your shareholders, you won't have the capital invest. But those are still self-serving. I want you to look outside. I want you to think about, who do we serve out in the world? At Menlo, we talk about ending human suffering in the world as it relates to technology, and our number 1 object of affection are the end users of software. Now, we're a contract software design and development firm. We typically never actually get to meet the end users of the software we build. They never even know who we are. They don't pay us for what we do, but yet their lives are impacted every single day by the work that we've done. So we want to reach past the normal stakeholders, because that kind of purpose can carry your team through tough times. Because there will be tough times. Joy is not the same as happiness. We won't be happy every minute of every day. This is hard work what we do. It's hard work what you do. But this idea of starting with purpose is a fundamental act of leadership. I once had a life insurance company come on a tour. We get about 3,000 people a year come on tours, and this life insurance came to visit us. And I asked them, who do you serve? And their immediate answer, as you might expect, is they said, our policyholders. I said, I get it, and I'm not here to tell you who you serve, but I'm pretty sure when your product is most useful, your policyholder isn't here anymore. And they're like, oh yeah. And suddenly it dawned on them, yeah, the beneficiary of the policy is who they actually serve. People they will never meet, people who don't know who they are, people who've never paid them a cent for what they do. And as I was describing this to this team, there was a tear rolling down the face of one of the women in the group. I said, what's going on? She said, Rich, we just outsourced our claims department to an offshore firm with the primary instructions: prevent fraud. So that person you're talking about, we serve, we're first going to treat like a criminal, long before we get to empathy, compassion, understanding, and execution. They were convicted in that moment that they'd made a terrible mistake and went home trying to figure out how to fix it. Leadership is ethereal. It requires you to move people to new ways of thinking with influence, not with hierarchical authority. I'm not saying bosses are bad and leaders are good, because we probably all have good and bad examples of both. But the boss has a card that they can play that most others don't, and it's you have to do it because I told you so. And sometimes that can be valuable, but you can have leaders anywhere in your organization. Value them, lift them up, encourage them. You can build leaders anywhere inside your organization. Pursue systems thinking over bureaucracy. I probably preaching to the choir here about that. But systems thinking is so fundamentally different. I will tell you the difference between a systems-oriented company and a hero-based organization is that when something goes wrong, hero-based organizations look for someone to blame. When systems-based organizations go wrong, leaders ask themselves, how did our systems let us down and allow this to happen? And we have a wonderful relationship with Vital Smarts, the people who wrote the books Crucial Conversation and Influencer, and we have a poster on our walls at Menlo that says, your organization is perfectly designed to create the behaviors you're currently experiencing. Yeah, we're doing it to ourselves. But the good news is, we can change it. Care for your team, and not just the team, but the leaders on the team. We need caring in both directions. You might imagine in our world, the way we have people working together side by side is unusual. It's a non-conforming way to work in the software industry, two programmers sharing a keyboard with one another. Can you imagine? Most software teams take their programmers, put them in sensory deprivation chambers, let them put headphones on, let them turn their keyboards and monitors away from the door, turn the lights down low and make it library quiet. And then later lament that our team members lack interpersonal skills. Shocking. You think it's because nobody's talking to one another. Well, in our environment, we have not cornered the market on extroverted programmers. But the ability to teach people how to care for one another is probably one of the most fundamental elements of our leadership model. We have a simple construct. When you're having a problem with another person, ask them if they're okay. Check in with them as a human being long before you're checking in with them as a colleague, a fellow programmer, a high-tech anthropologist, or any other roles on our team. Maybe ask, did I do anything to upset you? And in this way, you start to build human relationships. Learn together. We have to build learning into organizations. If we don't build learning into organizations, we'll fall behind. Heck, even if we do build learning into our organization, we're falling behind. It's why you're here. Your organizations are making an investment in you, and they want you to bring something back from here. That's often very difficult. So we need to look at the systems for learning. I will tell you, in our environment, when we pair and switch the pairs every 5 days, that's a fundamental construct of our learning system. And ultimately, I believe one of the most important roles of leaders is the ability to tell stories. Stories of our past, stories of pain, stories of success. Stories are what connect heart to soul, mind to body and spirit. Stories are what connect concept to reality. Stories are the things of human civilization. Campfires, totems, anthems of nations. Stories are what bind us together as tribes and teams. It's a fundamental act of leadership. Once you get good at storytelling, you will curate stories, and you will tell those stories over and over again in order to remind people, why do we do things the way we do them? Stories are an important part of that. Where does the journey begin? I will tell you, there's a lot of times in a conference like this, I'll overhear people say, man, I wish my boss was here to hear this. Because they really need to change. You can rent me, by the way, so you can. But let me tell you where change had to begin. It had to begin with me. And the moment of change started when I brought my 8-year-old into work. That's not her and that's not me, but trust me, I brought my 8-year-old into work on one of those take your children to work days. And I was a VP at the time, newly minted VP. And my daughter sat in my office at my task table watching the VP work. Can you imagine a more boring day? I mean, what on earth is she gonna, my dad does email, I can't wait to get to work. Fortunately, she was wise enough to bring coloring books and crayons and stickers so she had something to do. But at the end of the day, I thought I better ask her. I better find out what she found out because her teacher's going to ask her the next day. And I said, Sarah, how was your day? What did you see? Out of the mouths of babes. She said, Dad, what I saw is you're really important here. Like, what? She goes, yeah, what I saw is nobody here can make a decision without asking you first. Ugh. I was convicted in that moment. I was the hero. The only way to scale a hero-based organization is to scale the hero. The only way to scale the hero is overtime. And my grandest fear was that I was going to wake up 10 years later and realized I missed the best days of being a dad. And I didn't want that. So I will tell you the easiest place to start is the hardest place to change. And it's in you. That's where you have to begin. And yes, we want those grand and glorious purpose-filled organizations. We want to work on things that are bigger than ourselves. And people come to me and say, Rich, you're the entrepreneur, you're the CEO, of course you can make change. And yeah, people at the top can call us to the moon and back. They can invent things like the Peace Corps with a simple speech. But let me tell you a different story of change to encourage you wherever you are in your organization. Anybody who's either from Detroit or flies through Detroit on Delta will recognize this is the McDonald's inside of the McNamara Terminal at Detroit Metro Airport. And I'll admit, I have a weakness. Quarter pounder with cheese, large fry, Coke. At this McDonald's. I swear I don't do it anywhere. Well, maybe not anywhere else, but mostly here, okay? It's a busy restaurant inside of a busy airport. And I would go in there, I would get my food, I would sit down, and there was this guy, and his name was Mike. And Mike was hustling. He's an older guy, had his McDonald's shirt on, and he's just running around the restaurant, hustling from table to table, cleaning up all the little bits and pieces that each of us left behind carelessly as we moved on to our flight. But every time Mike got near me, he leaned in and he said, how's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? I'm thinking to myself, who is this guy, right? I said, and then each time I went, he did the same thing. And I thought, man, they are so lucky to have him. And then one day I go and he's off shift. And here's this young kid pulling a sled of garbage out of the back of the McDonald's, probably 17 years old. And he comes by my table and he leans in. He says, how's it going? Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin? I'm like, what is going on at this McDonald's? I mean, this is one of the most relationless places on the planet, inside of one of the most relationless places on the planet. I went up to the manager and I thanked him. And he thanked me for noticing. And he said, Rich, this is a competitive place. Anything we can do to give ourselves an edge over all the other restaurants here, we're going to do. But here's the point. I'm pretty sure the manager of that McDonald's didn't call up McDonald's corporate and say, hey guys, could we form a committee to write a policy on kindness and napkins? No, they just did it. And here's the neat part. It was free. You know, I know it can feel overwhelming when you look at the challenges your organizations face and you say, where would I even begin? Begin here, begin around you. Start being the change you want to see in the world. You can make a difference too. Now, I know what happens in a conference like this. You hear a speaker, you talk to a colleague, you go to a session, and you're inspired, and you're ready to go back to work, and you are so thrilled because you're going to bring this new idea back with you. And what happens is you run into the first person at work who wasn't here, and you say, I have this great new idea. I learned it at the conference. And you know what the response is. That won't work here. It's against policy. We tried that 10 years ago. It didn't work then. It's not going to work now. And right there, right, the idea dies, doesn't it? It dies in the vine because you got meetings to go to, you got emails to answer, and you never get back to it, and it evaporates like the morning fog. I want to arm you with one simple response when that happens, when you get back. Look them in the eye and say, I get it, but let's try something before we defeat it. Let's run the experiment. Now, I've seen this work so many different ways in organizations large and small. Let me tell you one place where it worked at Menlo. 13 years ago, Tracy had little Maggie. She was off on maternity leave. She was ready to come back to Menlo, but the daycare they planned to use was full. Grandparents lived too far away to help. And Tracy came to me and said, Rich, I really want to come back to work. We don't know what to do. Now, I will tell you in that moment, there was a screaming match that occurred in my brain. You know those kind of dark voice and a bright voice, right? The dark voice said, don't you dare say what you're about to say. HR will kill you. The lawyers will freak. The insurance policies will go through the roof. The bright voice said, you're an entrepreneur. You can do whatever you want. It's your company. You don't even have an HR department. Now, I want to stick up for a second for HR people because I don't think anybody in the history of HR ever got into HR for any other reason than serving the humans. They didn't sign up for torturing people with forms and bureaucracy, but that's where they often end up. But I looked at Tracy and I said, bring her in. And she looked at me with this funny look on her face and says, what do you mean? I said, bring her into work. This was not an offer to build a daycare. The baby was going to be with mom. And she said, all day? And I said, sure. She said, every day? Right? She's testing to see if I thought this through. Nope. And she looked around the big open room that is Menlo, and she said, Rich, where will I put her? I said, Tracy, she's 3 months old. She's not going anywhere. Just put her on the floor in a bassinet or a car seat or carrying her front pack. She goes, yeah, but what if she makes a baby fuss? I said, Tracy, it's like a noisy restaurant here. You'll never hear it. She goes, come on, you've raised 3 girls. What if she makes that big baby fuss? I said, Tracy, you're the mom. I trust you. You'll do the right thing. We'll work it out together. Let's run the experiment. Isn't she adorable? That's not Maggie. That's Ellie. Ellie is Menlo baby number 8. This has been a wonderful experience. Now, when you run experiments, and you know this because you probably run some in your own organization, expect the unexpected, especially if it involves little humans. Now, little Ellie here learned to pair program. Ellie went to design meetings. Did Maggie fuss? Of course she did. She was a baby. But if it wasn't for food or tired or diaper change, the team would race and say, no, it's my turn to hold the baby. These babies are raised by the village. And then we found out you can pair the babies too. And we figured out this system works for extroverts and for introverts. I'll let you decide which is which. This is Josiah and Flynn, Menlo babies number 22 and 23 in the last 13 years. They come in, yeah. This has been a wonderful experiment. Now, we found out one other thing. We found out that our customers behave better when you bring babies to meetings. They don't yell at you. They don't swear at you. They think you're awesome. So the babies are unpaid members of the marketing team. Menlo baby number 25 arrived on Halloween Day. This is an option available both for moms and for dads. And Ben and his wife are absolutely planning on little James is his name, coming into Menlo in a few months. It's been a delightful part of our culture. Okay, so that's inside of Menlo, but how does this translate? You're like, Rich, I get it, you're a small company, you can do whatever you want, but what about a big company? Well, let me tell you the story of AME Ferrero, VP of Claims at Mass Mutual. Mass Mutual is a 180-year-old company. Anybody here have a company that's older than 180 years? Anybody? What company is older than 180 years? Social services. Really? Oh, the post office. Okay, yeah, okay, the post office. All right. Yeah, all right. I get it. Founded by Ben Franklin. Okay, you got me there. All right. I'd really like to help the post office. I mean, because my brother worked there for his entire career, so if I can help the post office anyway, let me know. He would love it. But let me tell you about Mass Mutual, AME Ferrero. I encouraged them along the lines of run the experiment. I did a leadership team meeting with them. I left them with that simple phrase, and 6 months later, they invited me back. They said, Rich, we want to show you what's happened. And so I went back and I toured around the facility, and as I met up with Amy and we're walking down this wonderful marbled corridor inside of their $30 billion a year life insurance company, and she runs claims. They do about $3 billion a year in claims every year. And we turned the corner. She said, Rich, as we go into claims, which is this 100,000 square foot facility of half-height cubicles, you are going to see helium balloons. I said, okay, what is it, party? Are you celebrating? No. Everywhere you see a balloon taped to a desk is a team member declaring, I'm running an experiment, come talk to me. I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. As we turned the corner, there were balloons as far as the eye could see. I'm like, wow. So I ran up to Susan. I said, Susan, tell me your experiment. She beamed with pride. She says, well, let me tell you, I'm in charge of quality. Before the check goes out the door, I'm going to make sure it's right. I do step A, step B, and step C. What I learned, though, was step C, if you make a mistake there, you have to redo step B, and step B is the longest stage of the process. So I just switched the process, and I went A, C, B. It sounded pretty simple, but she's just beaming with energy. And I said, Susan, how long have you worked here? She says, 19 years. I said, have you always been like this? She said, no, I hated my job. I was counting the days to retirement. I hated the drive into work. I said, what's different now? She says, now we can run experiments. I said, what was it like before? She says, well, in the old days, you had to go up 5 levels, over, down 5 levels. Every idea we had died in the vine. You just stopped bringing ideas. Now think about the change in that one person inside of that large organization. This idea of energizing your team is available to all of you, because if Amy can do that with the Mass Mutual team, and this is a picture of their team at an actual celebration, let me tell you, this is not your grandfather's life insurance company anymore. This has been an awesome set of changes inside of a very large company. I want to just reveal to you the opportunity that exists for you as it does for us. We've always had dogs at Menlo. This is not a story about dogs, like the baby story was actually not a story about babies, but you'll remember dogs and babies. But the gentleman in the orange shirt was coming in for his weekly show and tell with us, where he catches up on the progress on his project. And he called me up ahead of show and tell. He says, "Hey, Rich, do you mind if I bring Buster with me to show and tell?" And I said, "Sure, who's Buster?" And he said, "My Great Dane." Oh. Buster greeted me at the front door by putting his paws on my shoulder. I'm 6'5", his head was here. Now, here's what was happening here, though, and this is an important thing for you to take home. Michael couldn't bring Buster into where he worked. It wouldn't have been appropriate. If he knew what he did for a living, he'd say, "No way should they have dogs there," and it wouldn't have been appropriate. Nothing about don't like dogs or anything like that. But when Michael worked with us, he wanted to be more like us. That's the opportunity you have. If you become change in a way that so many people want to come see how you do what you do, you will become the change that exists in the world. And you can make changes not only in your own organization, but you can make changes everywhere. As I said, we get 3,000 people a year come through our doors just to see how we do what we do. And they leave inspired, and some of them leave inspired to make big changes in your organization. That is the opportunity that exists for you. As Rollo May famously stated, the opposite of courage is not cowardice, but conformity. I want to push you to the edge of excellence and have you think about joy. And I want to let you know that sitting outside those doors are a couple of Menlonians you can chat with, and if you just happen to want to, you can buy a copy of the big book or pick up a free copy of the airplane poster. Thank you very much.